Welcome to the 5th unit of English Now. Today we have these really interesting topics to improve our daily English. Adjectives and how to use them to make comparisons. The very famous phrasal verbs. Pronunciation. Today we'll learn how to pronounce the English R. How to describe people. Definite and indefinite articles. And of course, English at work. Today we'll talk about solving problems and much more. Vocabulary, words to watch, common expressions. Shall we start? Let's go. As I've just said, we have really interesting topics today. In our first lesson, we'll practice how to use adjectives in English. Very useful indeed. Okay, adjectives. First of all, in English, adjectives go before the noun. Adjective plus noun, always. For example, the blue sea, a nice boy, a big table, a cold drink. Always before the noun, okay? Good. The second important thing you need to know about adjectives in English is that we always use the same form, the singular, plural, feminine and masculine. Let's take the adjective thin, for example. We can talk about a thin woman, a thin man, some thin women, some thin men. It's always the same. You can't say this isn't easy. So please remember, don't add S in plural. It's not necessary. This is a very common mistake among English students, so write it down. Now, how do you compare things in English? Let's see. In order to really understand how comparatives work, we need to classify adjectives in two groups. In the first group are the adjectives that only have one syllable, and the adjectives that have two syllables and end in Y. Let's take, for example, the adjective old. If we want to make a comparison with old, we add ER to the adjective, plus than, like this. Old, older than. For example, my car is older than your car. More examples. Big, bigger. This dog is bigger than a pony. Hot, hotter. Today it is hotter than yesterday. Cheap, cheaper. Potatoes are cheaper than oysters. They are all short adjectives, so we add ER plus than to make comparisons with them. By the way, the adjectives that end in a vowel and a consonant double the consonant. Big, bigger. hot, hotter. The adjectives that contain two syllables and end in y work the same way, except we need to change the y for I, like this. Happy, happier. She is happier than him. Busy, busier. I'm busier than you. Hairy, hairier. My husband is hairier than yours. Let's talk about the second group of adjectives. The adjectives that contain two syllables but don't end in y, and the adjectives that have more than two syllables. When we want to make comparisons with them, we follow this structure. More plus adjective plus than. Easy. Let's take some of those long adjectives and see how they work. With famous, more famous than. For example, Elvis is more famous than Enrique Iglesias. With expensive, more expensive than. For example, a house is more expensive than an apartment. With intelligent, more intelligent than. For example, monkeys are more intelligent than fish. It's not that bad, is it? The more you practice, the quicker you'll get it. Let's talk about superlatives. Remember the first group of adjectives? These adjectives become superlatives by adding est. Like this. Small, smallest. This is the smallest mouse in the world. Silly, silliest. Mario says the silliest things. Lucky, luckiest. I feel I'm the luckiest person alive. Just like before, those adjectives that end in y, change it for I. Now, what about the adjectives that belong to the second group? We form superlatives with these adjectives by adding the most before the adjective. For example, careful, the most careful. She's the most careful dentist I know. Beautiful, the most beautiful. This is the most beautiful photograph of this collection. Interesting, the most interesting. My grandma is one of the most interesting people in my family. Okay, one last thing about adjectives. How do we compare two elements that are the same level? Very easy. If, for example, I have a daughter and a boy and their height is the same, I would say my daughter is as tall as my son. This is the structure as, adjective, as. And this works with all the adjectives. It doesn't matter how many syllables they have. More examples. This suitcase is as light as a feather. My dog is as lazy as my cat. These days, I'm as busy as a bee. Perfect. We're done with the first lesson. Too much information? Don't worry. You can check the book and practice at your own pace.
There are two English adjectives that are quite special and that you need to know about. Good and bad are irregular adjectives, both when we use them as comparatives and as superlatives. It's very important to remember these forms. Please take note. Good, better than, best. Bad, worse than, worst. The good news is that these forms are the same for masculine and feminine, for singular and plural. You're welcome.